You are about to watch your brain redraw the edges of what you think is real. It won't ask for permission. It never does. It revises, smooths, edits, and signs your name at the bottom as if you authored the whole scene. Imagine a late street wet from a light rain, the yellow of a diner window spilling onto the sidewalk like warm syrup. A bus huffs by. Someone laughs behind you. A single neon letter stutters. Your eyes move. Your mind pretends it didn't. In the space between blinks, entire neighborhoods of detail vanish and are replaced with clean, confident lines. The world feels continuous. It isn't. Continuity is a choice the brain keeps making on your behalf, a quiet collapse of possibility into one workable version of now. In labs, we can watch attention behave like a lens, pointed at motion, and it sharpens edges. Point it at color, and the palette opens. Take it away, and the image falls back into a blur. Your eyes capture patches. Your cortex stitches them into a coat. None of this is deception. It's survival. The visual field is too dense, the auditory field too layered. So the brain commits a practical act. It decides what matters, and then it fills the gaps. Observation is not passive. Observation is a form of participation. Attend to a thing, and you entangle with it. Its features rise, its rivals dim. The map of perception redraws itself, and the streets you use most get thicker on the page. You felt this while walking home after a difficult conversation. Suddenly, everyone has the same jacket as the person you just argued with. Every car seems to be the model they drive. The city didn't change. The waiting did. Your internal cartographer leaned over the table and moved the lamp until the light favored certain avenues. Coherence arrives not because the world simplifies, but because the noise stops steering you. In the quiet, the landmarks reveal themselves. There is a small experiment that shows how ruthless the mapmaker can be. Ask someone to watch players pass a basketball and count the passes. In the middle, a person in a costume strolls through. Many will not see it. They were not blind. They were efficient. The task narrowed the field, and the brain invested its budget accordingly. This is not a failure. It's an allocation. Yet it teaches something sobering. What you don't ask for, you often won't see. The brain's generosity is targeted. The rest is accounted as quantum noise, flicker, shimmer, discard. Attention changes the evidence. That's not mysticism, it's mechanics. Neurons fire more readily to preferred features, like a city that plows certain roads first. If you keep revisiting a pattern, faces, threats, opportunities, the map adds a legend and a shortcut. The next time you look, the route is already highlighted. Your feeling of recognition is not proof the object is objectively prominent. It's proof that your history gives it weight. The present is negotiated by the past. Consider a lab at 2 a.m. A graduate student reviews frames of a simple reach and grasp task. The subject's hand moves toward a cup. A dot tracks the gaze. The dot jumps ahead of the hand, then settles on the cup's rim just before the fingers pinch. The student squints and writes, "Prediction precedes contact." The brain must turn physics into plans. It estimates friction, shape, and the force needed to lift. It runs simulations and then cuts away the ones that won't work. Every decision is a small collapse of possibility into one motion path. You don't experience the discarded futures. You experience the one that won. Now think about memory. It is not a shelf of identical jars. Each time you reach for one, your hand warms it. You rewrite it as you retrieve it. The edges blur and then re-solidify, often aligned with your current story. Memory is a form of perception, traveling backward, a second drafting of the past. If you've ever returned to a childhood home and found it smaller, you witnessed the map shrinking to fit new coordinates. The place didn't change. Your measurement did. That is the scandal and the mercy of being alive. We are cartographers who keep updating the grid and then swear the grid was always that way. The brain claims constant scenes in a world that arrives in pulses. Sound is pressure waves. Light is a spray of photons. Time itself is sampled. Yet you feel a river, not a faucet. This sensation of flow is an achievement of coherence. When signals align within a narrow range of timing, the system binds them into a single experience. An object, a voice, a face across a room. Lose the timing, and the world falls to pieces. Keep the timing, and it becomes symphonic. You move like a wave, you decide like a witness, and the city of your senses holds. If you've ever stared at the same email for 10 minutes reading the same sentence again and again, you are watching the limits of your map. Fatigue reduces resolution. Stress narrows the field. Desire stretches it in the direction of what it wants. A person in love notices every version of a certain smile. A person in fear can hear a distant doorknob turn from 3 rooms away. The brain is not lying, it is prioritizing. Uncertainty is not an error. It is the room where freedom breathes. You feel anxious inside it because the exits aren't labeled yet. But that same uncertainty allows for alteration. In superposition, the future contains more than one doorway. When you choose, the door you walk through becomes a hallway, and the others return to silence. On a bus at night, the glass is dark enough to return your reflection. You watch the streets drift past behind your face. For a moment, 2 worlds overlap you in the pain, the city beyond it. This is how perception feels from the inside, layers laid over a frame, weighted by relevance, filtered by prediction. You constantly merge the immediate with your model of what usually happens next. That's why a single surprise can feel like a break in the film. The projector stutters. The brain scrambles to reconcile. Afterward, it edits the anomaly into the narrative and smooths the splice. The map updates, and the next time you travel this route, the corner where it happened holds a small star. Some mornings you wake with the sense that the day is already decided. The calendar acts like gravity. The emails pre-exist your glance. This is also a map, the cognitive economy of foregone conclusions. If you let it, it will carry you end to end without a single question. But every now and then you slow down. You allow silence to expand. In that silence, the field between thoughts hums quietly. New landmarks emerge, a colleague's tone you never registered before, the shape of your own impatience, the taste of food when you chew without scrolling, the sound of your shoes on a hallway floor. Observation is skill and kindness. To look carefully is to join the world rather than simply consume it. There is an old metaphor that vision is a flashlight. That's too narrow. It's more like a voting system. Photoreceptors elect candidates from a noisy ballot. Early visual areas negotiate coalitions, edges, motion depth. Attention casts the deciding votes. Higher regions draft policy names, meanings, goals. The laws take effect downstream in your motor maps. You reach speak, step, or refrain. Democracy implies error. It also implies flexibility. When the coalition shifts, the city feels different. Entanglement is not mystical here. It's practical. What you couple your attention to will start to move you. In training, musicians learn to hear layers in a chord, the dull thump of a thumb, the bright ring of a high string, the sympathetic resonance that bridges them. Over time, their map of sound acquires neighborhoods non-musicians never visit. The same is true for surgeons, bakers, mechanics, parents of newborns, people who read poems aloud at night. Practice redraws the atlas. Repetition carves a canyon so thoroughly that even a thin river can find its way. You might call it expertise. The brain calls it efficiency. Coherence costs energy. Expertise earns a discount. The long road becomes a path you can walk in the dark. The map expands outward but also inward. Try this. Close your eyes and imagine your kitchen. Where is the kettle? What color is the dish towel? You are not merely recalling images. You are generating a scene on the fly. Prediction networks, lighting up the same territories that actual perception would. Imagery is an internal lab, safe and quiet, where the brain runs ahead of the moment and practices arriving. Athletes use it. Patients recovering from injury use it. People rehearsing difficult conversations use it. The nervous system trains on counterfactuals, not because they will all come true, but because exposure reduces surprise. The next time you step into the real kitchen, the shelves feel inevitable. The danger of maps is also their gift; they feel objective. If your friend fails to return a text, your social atlas offers a meaning, indifference, conflict, preoccupation, a dead battery. Under stress, the map favors the alarming option. Anxiety is the overfitting of a nervous system trained on threats. But the brain can be retrained. It is plastic in the sober sense of the word, moldable, not magical. When you practice noticing other explanations, you literally recruit alternative routes. Myelination thickens those paths. Future signals travel more readily along them. You don't force yourself to feel safe. You become a person with more than one way home. Here is a small scene to carry a child on a sidewalk stops because a beetle is crossing. The adult behind her is late and steps from foot to foot. The child leans down and watches the slow work of legs in coordination. The adult taps the phone, sees the minutes vanishing, calculates. Two maps side by side, neither wrong, both honest about the weights they carry. If the adult can pause even for a breath, the beetle's world might enter. The heartbeat slows the edges. Sharpened time dilates the way it does during a first snowfall or the last line of a letter. In that dilation, the adult can feel the architecture inside the hidden stairs that lead from urgency to a wider room. Our brains are constantly predicting the future and correcting themselves. This is not a metaphor, it's an engineering principle. Prediction errors drive learning. When the world matches our forecast, nothing changes. When it violates, the map updates. Some violations are small: this door opens inward, not outward. Some are large: this person whom I loved is gone. The large ones require a wholesale redrawing. The nervous system resists because redrawing is metabolically expensive and emotionally painful. But if we wait long enough in the room of uncertainty, the new lines settle. The streets connect again. Grief does not vanish. It integrates. You recognize the shop front where someone once waited for you. You still look in the window. You keep walking. It is tempting to believe that reason alone drives this updating, but feeling is the fuel. The amygdala is not an alarm bell only for danger. It is a prioritizer for importance. If the stakes are low, the correction can be small and quiet. If the stakes are life and love, the correction must leave a mark. We think of scars as surface features. They are also instructions to the future. Be careful here. Be brave here. This area has known fire and can carry water now. When you meet someone who has navigated their own rewrites with honesty, you can feel the sturdiness in their presence. Their map includes vast silence where others have only noise. People say, "I'm stuck in my head," as if the mind were a room with no doors. But perception is a bridge by design. It meets the world halfway. Walk outside and listen for a distant sound, maybe a sprinkler ticking behind a hedgerow. Notice how your posture changes. You tilt your head, focus your gaze, reduce your own movements to gather more signal. You become a better sensor by reducing self-generated noise. In moments of quiet intentionality, the nervous system achieves coherence with its environment. The reward is clarity, without drama, information, without panic. You become a good witness to what is simply there. Don't blink, the title says, and we both know you will. Blinking is a necessity, a maintenance loop. The brain already compensates by gating visual input during the lid's movement, so the world doesn't shudder. But underneath the playful warning is a truer one. Notice the moments when you look away from your own life, due to habit rather than care. Blinking is fine, numbing is different. One keeps the eye wet, the other keeps the story stale. When you feel the reflex to scroll away from a difficult feeling, name it. Naming is a stabilizing force, like placing a pin in a map with a tiny handwritten caption: heavy, sharp, old, tender. You don't have to fix it. You only have to admit that it is here. Picture yourself sitting at a table with a cup of tea, late enough that the building quiets, and the refrigerator's hum becomes a character. You place your palm on the tabletop and feel the wood's grain, the small dents, where other cups once made brief moons. If you soften your gaze, you can perceive the field around your thoughts, the way ideas approach from the edges like weather. Some pass without landing, others settle and cast shade. You have choices, not infinite ones but real ones. You can ask your attention to return. You can let a thought finish without feeding it to 5 more. You can allow the current to slow until you can feel each ripple distinguish itself from the last. The map of perception is not written in ink. It's written in something closer to wet clay. Sleep smooths it. A new skill presses sharp lines into it. A friendship real and earned reshapes it around a shared road. People sometimes hope for a single revelation that will redraw everything forever. But maps resist revolution when roads are still used daily. More often, the change is tract by tract. This lane becomes 2. That intersection gets a light. Here a small bridge, and suddenly, you can cross in the rain. Think about the physics words you've heard used to dress up everyday life. Wave, particle field, collapse, coherence. Used clumsily, they can sound like incense. Used gently, they point. A wave carries energy without carrying matter. Your moods can move through a house the same way. A particle is a localized event. There are moments that happen only here, only now, and they change the future's options. The field is the context in which all of this takes place, the medium that allows influence to travel. When the field between us is calm, the smallest signal arrives unbroken. When it is noisy, even a shout becomes static. You have likely heard that when 2 people pay attention to each other deeply, their heart rates can synchronize their gestures, mirror their speech, rhythms align. That is not magic, it is coordination. Bodies solve cooperation by predicting each other and reducing conflict. The map extends beyond the skull, into conversation, into shared work, into the unremarkable miracle of 2 people carrying a couch through a narrow door. We form temporary superorganisms during these acts, dances of inference and correction. Entanglement doesn't require poetry here. It requires attention and a willingness to be changed by what you notice. Now, a brief return to the lab. A subject sits before a screen while dots flicker. The task is to detect a pattern in noise. Their performance improves when they're given a hint. It improves further when they feel safe. Stress tightens the window through which signals are counted, biasing toward alarms. Safety broadens it, allowing subtler patterns to be admitted. The takeaway is not sentimental. It is procedural. If you want to perceive well, reduce needless threat. If you can't reduce it outside, reduce it inside by how you frame the moment. I must solve this. Now becomes I am examining a problem. The velocity drops. The resolution improves. We speak of changing your mind as if minds were houses, and we were swapping furniture. The truth is more kinetic. Change your attention, and the house itself brightens in new rooms. Change your posture just a little, and the lights in the hallway wake. The map is embodied. Stand up, and the vestibular system reweights your confidence in visual cues. Skip a meal, and the interoceptive map starts highlighting threats because scarcity often traveled with danger. Drink water, breathe, slowly step into a cooler room, and the map recedes to a manageable scale again. Your brain is in your body, is in a world of deadlines and conversations and buses that sometimes arrive and sometimes don't. Any practice that respects all 3 has leverage. When you notice your own narrative tensing into a single interpretation, you can try a compact experiment. Write down 3 other meanings that are also consistent with the data. Not 5, not 10, just 3. This interrupts the brain's rush to a premature collapse. It keeps the story in superposition for a breath longer, creating room for new information to arrive. You are not weakening your stance. You are keeping it honest. Uncertainty hurts because we evolved to prefer action. But the pause keeps you from driving into the same ditch again and again with great confidence. There is a phenomenon called change blindness. Someone alters their hairstyle. A painting is swapped for another, An object moves on a cluttered desk and we fail to notice. There's a twin to it that we mention: less change, kindness. We can fail to notice improvements too. Habituation hides progress. You stop hearing the hum of the fridge and the hum of your own better habits. So keep a simple record, not a manifesto. A sentence at night. What did I perceive today that I couldn't have a year ago? You will begin to see the map's new roads. You will drive them more often. The old potholes won't vanish. You'll just stop mistaking them for destiny. We are told to trust our gut and to guard against bias. Both are accurate depending on what you are measuring and over what time frame. A gut is a fast map. Bias is a persistent misweighting. The cure for bad heuristics is not paralysis, it is training. Seek feedback loops that are brisk but kind. Craft offers this in abundance. The potter who learns to feel the clay's readiness, the coder who learns the scent of a bug, the teacher who notices the moment a room's attention drifts and gently alters the lesson's tempo. Craft is the daily lab where perception meets the world and earns the right to edit. If you want a symbol for this whole act, consider the eye's fovea, the small pit of highest acuity. It is a tiny island in a large sea. To see clearly, you move it constantly, aligning it with what matters. Clarity is not a property of objects, it is a behavior. You give the world resolution by how you visit it. This is why stillness can be revealing. When you stop moving for a moment, your brain stops canceling your own motion and can detect the slow drift of a star or the fine tremor in your hand. Stillness is not the absence of life, it's a recalibration. The field resets. Coherence returns. In the end, as if there were an end, the map is not for collecting trophies of certainty, it's for traveling with grace through uncertainty. The nervous system learned to survive by turning too much into just enough. Modern life asks it to do this in environments the ancestors never knew: screens, feeds, notifications, rooms without windows. None of this is a moral failure. It is a mismatch. You can bring the systems closer again by designing friction into your day where speed would cost you clarity. Take a longer route once. Write by hand for a page. Let your eyes rest on something unlit. Watch how the world stops shimmering and gathers itself into handfuls you can actually hold. You might be wondering what any of this offers beyond an elegant explanation. It offers a specific permission to treat your attention as a studio rather than a battlefield. The studio is where drafts are allowed, where feedback is welcomed, where the map is pinned to the wall, and the cartographer stands back with a pencil behind the ear, tilts the head and says almost to themselves, "Something's missing here. Maybe a footbridge." A small correction today creates a path that will save you miles later. The city of your senses becomes a place you know how to navigate at night. There is another permission inside the first, to not rush your own reweighting. You are not a faulty machine requiring a reset. You are a living system undergoing a phase change. Melt and refreeze, dissolve and cohere. You will swing between wave and particle depending on the task. You will be broad when you need to discover, and narrow when you need to decide. Both are legitimate modes. The skill is knowing which to invite and when to trade. Some days you will fail at this. So will everyone else you admire. And now, as the kettle cools and the building breathes, notice the shape of the room you're in. The way the light avoids the far corner, the seam where wall meets ceiling, the soft perimeter of sound where the world beyond these walls muffles into a dull hush. If you listen closely, you can hear your own attention shifting gears the way a train does as it leaves a station slow, then faster, a measured acceleration into the next stretch of track. There is no need to race. The rails are already there. The scenery will reveal itself when you give it the chance, and your brain, the cartographer, the voter, the studio light, will keep quietly redrawing the map so you can pass through. And as you pass through, there is a choice to pause in the threshold and let the next frame arrive a fraction of a second later than habit would prefer. That fraction is not wasted. It is where much of the hidden work happens. The brain clears a little space, checks the coordinates, asks a quiet question about what is truly in front of you, rather than what your model insisted would be there. In that fraction, the field between thoughts hums and a new contour appears, the kind that only reveals itself when you decline the first and easiest interpretation. Take a simple scene: you reach for a glass in the sink, and it slips just enough for your pulse to jump. Within a blink, your motor maps reroute the fingers, tighten your wrist, adjusts its angle. The save happens too quickly for language to narrate, but the update writes itself instantly into the map. Next time, your grip anticipates the slipperiness. The world did not become more dangerous or more manageable. Your brain recalibrated. You aren't accumulating a library of facts. You are refining a choreography, one tiny gesture at a time. There is a rumor that clarity is always calm. Sometimes, maybe. But often clarity is energizing. The moment you finally name what you are seeing, this is avoidance, this is care, this is fatigue disguised as efficiency. Energy returns to you the way a locked joint releases. The map gains topography. Valleys for rest, ridges for decision, and the space that fear kept inflating shrinks to a workable scale. You can cross that distance. You can walk it with ordinary shoes. At the edges of sleep, you may feel perceptions decouple and recombine. Random images join with scraps of sound, the whistle of a kettle, the memory of a hallway, a face from last year, speaking words they never said. This is not your brain misbehaving. It is testing associations in low light, seeing which roads connect under minimal supervision. Dreams appear nonsensical because the traffic laws relax. The next day, some of those playful bridges will remain, letting a metaphor travel between two towns that were once strangers. The creative life depends on this. If you force coherence too soon, the bridges never form. If you never invite coherence, the bridges lead nowhere. Consider the ordinary magic of reading. Your eyes scan black shapes on a lit surface, and without conscious command, you hear a voice in your head that is neither yours nor anyone else's. A neutral narrator conducting soundless speech. Your perceptual system fuses marks and meanings through years of practice until the coupling is immediate. If you've ever tried to read a sign in a language you do not know, you've felt the difference. Marks revert to marks. The narrator stays silent. What looks like intelligence is often familiarity. What looks like ignorance is often unfamiliarity. This recognition softens judgment of yourself, of others. You wouldn't scold a violin for sounding awkward after one afternoon of practice. You wouldn't call your eyes foolish because they can't read an alphabet they never met. In the same way, you can forgive your brain for not yet noticing what it has never been taught to weigh. A scientist once told a story about training attention to flicker at a different frequency. In one experiment, subjects watched alternating images while a subtle target appeared only when the stream slowed. Those who had trained in meditation were more likely to catch it. The point was not superiority. It was bandwidth. When your system is less occupied with self-generated chatter, the channel opens for slow signals to arrive. Coherence follows like a tide entering a harbor, quiet, inevitable, reshaping the shoreline with each full breath. You do not need a monastery to prove this. Walk without your phone for 2 blocks. Let the eyes wander high and low. Feel the hips adjust to the terrain. Hear how your own footsteps measure the street. The city is still noisy, but your signal-to-noise ratio improves. In the office, a colleague misses a deadline, and your map summons a familiar path. They don't respect the work. There is another path nearby. They are overwhelmed and ashamed to admit it. And another, the task was unclear, and they optimized for what they thought mattered. Each path arrives with its own chemistry. If you choose, the first anger sharpens your view until only evidence of disrespect remains. Choose the second, and compassion swells, but might excuse what still needs correcting. Choose the third, and problem-solving lights up. None are morally pure. Each is awaiting. The ethical act isn't to choose the kindest story by default. It's to admit that your first story is not the only one, and then to seek data that would collapse the superposition honestly. Ask a question. Listen with the intention to be changed by what you hear. Observation here is participation. The act of looking creates the conditions under which a better truth can assemble. We underestimate how social the map is. Culture provides templates: what a good day looks like, how success feels when to consider a room safe. Templates save energy, but they also hide the corners we personally need. A template might say, a productive morning begins with a run. Your interoceptive map might say, a productive morning requires a slow stretch and warm toast. When you obey the template at the expense of your own data, the day feels technically correct and intimately wrong. When you treat your body like a source and not an obstacle, the day aligns without decoration. This is not indulgence. It is calibration. I knew someone who built film sets. They described their job as teaching a room to be itself so the camera can remember it. That line stuck because it describes perception too. Before the scene, the crew removes reflections that would distract the lens, muffles the air conditioning, because microphones hear more than human ears, and adds a little dust so the light has something to catch. We could mock this as artificial, or we could admire the fidelity to how a room actually feels when you stand inside it. Your brain does similar pre-production constantly. It boosts contrast, equalizes volume, and subtracts your own motion from the picture so the world doesn't smear. Without these edits, reality would be a storm of unweighted signals. With them, a face becomes a face, even in a crowd. Entropy still has its say. Systems tend toward disorder unless energy is applied. Rooms gather clutter. Inboxes gather demands. Attention scattershot across 20 tabs loses cohesion, and with it goodwill. This is not a moral flaw. It is a physical tendency. The remedy is periodic effort, applied gently and repeatedly, the way you wind a clock or water a plant. Keep a short list of objects that restore coherence with minimal cost. A glass of water, a deep breath, by an open window, a hand on the back of your neck, 3 slow sentences copied from a book you love into a small notebook. Repeat until the noise yields. The field steadies. The map resolves. You may fear that if you see more nuance, you will lose the courage to act. But courage doesn't require ignorance. It requires enough certainty to move and enough humility to update mid-stride. A firefighter commits to a route through smoke and listens hard for evidence that the route is wrong. That listening is not doubt, it is survival. The rest of us navigating offices and kitchens can borrow the method. Decide yes, but set your dials to hear the crackle that means change. Then pivot without needing to punish yourself for being wrong on the way to being more right. Where do errors live when you are alone? In the gap between sensation and story. You feel your heart rate rise. The story jumps in danger. But perhaps the heart is answering caffeine or excitement, or the search for a word that matters. Your interoception, the map of your own interior, can be trained. Researchers speak of granularity. Instead of stressed, notice tight chest, warm cheeks, quick breath. Instead of fine, notice steady breath, loose jaw, soft hands. The more granular the map, the more choices appear. The more choices, the less you are cornered by a word that cannot tell you where the exits are. Imagine 2 rooms. In the first, music plays faintly through the wall, and you can't locate the source. In the second, a speaker sits on a table and points toward you. Which room invites you to dance? Clarity is an invitation. When signals have direction, the body organizes. You tap your foot. You stand. You move. Your attention can do this for your day. Aim a speaker at one task, even if only for 15 minutes. The rest of the noise keeps existing, but your body will gravitate toward the clear signal because that is what bodies are built to do. The wave of scattered impulses collapses into a particle of action. You begin. Art is a training ground for this kind of collapse. A painter stares at an empty canvas until the field of possible images becomes unbearable. Then a first mark, a blue stroke, imperfect, committing. The rest of the painting is an argument with that mark: agreement, tension, editing, apology, insistence. What looks like inspiration from the outside is often iterative correction. You can give your day a first mark too. It doesn't need to be brilliant. It needs to be real enough that the next move becomes visible. The mind hates beginning, because beginning forces the future to narrow. But without that narrowing, nothing becomes anything. Technology has given us a new habitat that the nervous system is still learning to read. Infinite scroll mimics rivers, but feeds like a conveyor belt. Notifications borrow the shape of alarm while delivering trivia and partial emergencies. The map adapts by overweighting the digital doorway. That is not weakness. It is evidence of flexibility misused. One countermeasure is embarrassingly simple: set thresholds for entrance. Before you open an app, ask, what exact signal am I seeking? If you cannot answer in a sentence, wait. When you do enter, keep a soft timer, not in minutes, but in breaths. 20 slow breaths inside the feed and then back to the wider room. This is not a rule to obey forever. It's a way to remind the brain that it has a body attached, and the body is where reality still waits to be measured. If you spend long hours inside words, you know the pleasure of reading a line that rearranges your interior furniture. But there is another kind of line, the one you write yourself, when you realize you have been misseeing a person you love. Perhaps you kept drawing them with sharp edges because your own past demanded caution. Perhaps you softened them because you feared conflict. Updating the portrait is an act of care. It doesn't mean permitting harm. It means letting the other be more than your history's echo. Entanglement is real here. The more you attend to who they actually are, the more their features emerge, and the more you are altered in return. We talk about intuition as if it were a mysterious organ, but often it is just compression. Thousands of exposures distilled into a feeling that arrives faster than thought. A chess player doesn't compute all possible moves. They feel the shape of a winning board because they've seen 1,000 like it. In unfamiliar domains, intuition can mislead. The solution is not to discard it, but to calibrate it. Ask your intuition to show its work occasionally. What evidence supports this feeling? What evidence would disprove it? You don't have to hold a courtroom every time. Just remind the map that it draws from experience, not prophecy. There is a small ritual that turns down quantum noise and restores a signal worth following. It begins with noticing a micro-choice: the urge to interrupt, the reflex to check a screen, the press to fill a silence with words that don't need to be said. Take one breath before obeying. In that breath, your nervous system samples a broader field. Is this action a habit or a need? The answer is usually sufficient to steer. The collapse becomes conscious. You don't fight your instincts. You refine them. Picture a quiet lab with a metronome and a chair. A participant sits eyes closed and taps a key every time they think a second has passed. The distribution of taps reveals their internal clock. Stress tends to make the seconds short and staccato. Relaxation stretches them. Practice can adjust the meter. This isn't about productivity only. It's about aligning external time with lived time, so your days feel inhabited rather than rushed through. When you manage this for even an hour, other people can feel it around you. Your presence signals safety, and the field in the room changes. Conversations slow into clarity. Laughter lands more fully. Silence stops being interpreted as threat. We learn our own faces by reflection mirrors, photographs, but we learn our minds by how the world responds to them. If you see confusion where you meant to offer assurance, update the map. If you see relief where you expected resistance, update it faster. Feedback is a gift that arrives wearing costumes, some of them abrasive. Separate the costume from the content. The roughness is a delivery problem. The content is a road you may not have drawn yet. There's a story about a city planner who visited neighborhoods at dawn to watch where people actually walked before paving new sidewalks. The paths cut by feet across grass were called desire lines. Your brain has these too. The route you take unthinking to a certain memory whenever an old song plays. The way your eyes slip to the exit sign when a meeting runs long. The hand that reaches for a mug before your mind registers thirst. Notice the desire lines without mocking them. Some will deserve pavement. Others will deserve a small fence and a new path that protects the meadow. When overwhelm swells, it helps to narrow the window in a deliberate way. Choose one sensory channel and attend to it like a craftsperson. Close your eyes and listen only. Or keep your eyes open and soften every muscle from the jaw downward so the visual stream arrives unjostled. Your system will try to pull you back to the braided river of everything at once. Gently insist. The brain loves mastery, and mastery starts as selective engagement. Soon you will feel the reward coherence without force. This gentle narrowing is not avoidance. It is training a wide awareness that can later hold many streams without drowning. Memory deserves another glance here. We romanticize total recall, but forgetting is the brain's way of pruning branches that would otherwise crowd the canopy. You do not need to retain every headline or conversation detail. You need to retain the patterns that help you live with fewer collisions. When you are kind to someone, and they brighten your map, saves the path kindness as leverage. When you are unkind, and they shrink your map, saves that too. Over time, the geometry of your world reveals itself, and you can choose to be a builder of bridges rather than an exporter of turbulence. There is a phrase from physics used in a different context that feels true here: observation changes the observed. When you watch your own impatience arise, and name it impatience, stands down a little and the room breathes. When you watch your tenderness arrive, and thank it, tenderness stays to help. The observer in you is not an aloof judge. It is the part that makes space for what is present to be seen without being immediately punished or praised. It's the good host at the door, who greets each guest and points them honestly to the right room. If your life feels too loud, you can redesign for lower baseline noise. This is less glamorous than reinvention, but it is potent. Shorten one meeting by 10 minutes and end it at 10 minutes early every week until the map expects it. Replace a bright bulb with a softer one at the desk where you do your deeper work. Put your phone on a shelf instead of your pocket during dinner, so your body stops micro-reading for the buzz that means elsewhere. These acts are unremarkable, which is exactly why they work. The nervous system trusts what is repeated and quiet more than what is loud and rare. Curiosity is the engine and the mercy of this whole project. When curiosity is present, even your own mistakes become locatable. What made me think that? Instead of building a case for your defense, you build a case for better seeing. Children do this naturally until adults teach them that questions slow the march. But speed rarely brings us where we meant to go. Curiosity slows you enough to hear the field's small signals, the ones that point to a door in a wall that looked seamless. Sometimes the right act is to let a perception die. A belief that once helped you cross a river becomes heavy when the river dries up. You can set it down without condemning the version of you who carried it. Maps are provisional. The brain that kept you safe at 12 was extraordinary at its job. It built city walls of caution and outposts of vigilance. At 30, you may no longer live under siege. The walls can become gardens. The outposts can become observatories. It takes time to dismantle stone by stone. It takes gentleness to not despise the architecture that once saved you. We are not solitary cartographers. Friends and strangers lend us their maps constantly. Good art is a map. So is a well-told story about someone else's failure that makes your own feel survivable. Conversations with people unlike you are passport offices. They stamp your pages and widen your legal routes. The skill is to know which borrowed map to trust on which stretch of road. Take culinary advice from cooks, not from the loudest diner. Take directions in grief from those who have walked the long way without numbing. Take notes from elders about what matters at dusk. Ignore those who sell certainty for a living. Their maps have fewer roads than the world requires. You may worry that adjusting your map will erase the personality you've worked so hard to assemble. But a map is not a mask. It's a tool for better contact. When your perception becomes more faithful to what is present, your particularity has more room, not less. Idiosyncrasies survive the edit. In fact, they become kinder. A quick wit aimed at defense can become a quick wit aimed at relief. A meticulous streak that once micromanaged can become craftsmanship. The traits don't vanish. They find truer uses. Watch what happens when you choose a slower gaze with the people you love. The first minute may feel awkward, as if you've forgotten a line. Then details rise from the background, the way their mouth tilts when they are about to disagree but still want to be generous. The way their shoulders settle when you don't fill the silence with instructions. The way they return to their own map in your stead. The field between you quiets, and the signal of who they are reaches you without distortion. You do not need to say this out loud. Your body will know. Your next sentence will show it. In hard seasons, let time widen. The brain's urgency algorithm narrows perception to protect you, but it also blinds you to resources that only exist outside the tight corridor. If you cannot widen time in the day, widen it in the week. Choose a night with less overhead, step out under whatever sky you have, and let your eyes walk the distance from the nearest building edge to the faintest star. Something ancient recalibrates here. The wave of you remembers its scale. The particle of you holds its ground. Both can be true. Both can be carried back indoors. It's common to ask, how do I change my life? The question is honorable, but too large. Try this one. How do I change what I notice? The life tends to follow. Notice the micro moments where the map updates the save of a falling glass. The gentler interpretation, the breath that interrupts a reflex. Celebrate them without spectacle. You are not building a brand. You are building a world you can bear and even love. If you want to test the power of attention, choose an unremarkable object. A key, a spoon, a stone from a parking lot, and examine it for 2 minutes. You will feel resistance, then boredom. Then a subtle click. When meaning appears, the small scratches that prove a history. The weight distribution that explains how this tool fits a task. The way your own fingers learn its edges and relax. After 2 minutes, the object is no longer anonymous. It belongs to a category in your map that didn't exist before. Extrapolate gently. This is what you can do with a face, a skill, a fear. I think often of the phrase, fit to purpose. Our maps do not need to be beautiful in the museum sense. They need to be fit to purpose for the days we are actually living. Update the legend so it includes paths you can take with the energy you have. Mark the places where you tend to get lost, so the next time you arrive there, you have a lantern. Add a symbol for safe harbor, a friend, a bench, a sentence that steadies you when the ground turns to sand. This is not sentiment, it is design. There will be mornings when the brain wakes too early and begins drafting disasters before the sun. Lie there if you must, but try a small experiment. List in your head 5 things your senses can measure without interpretation. Cool air on the forearm, a car passing, the faint smell of laundry soap, the rectangle of light at the curtain's edge, the heaviness of your calf against the mattress. This shifts the system from speculation to registration. It doesn't solve the day. It introduces a different gravitational field, one that keeps you from spinning off into orbits of imagined harm. When you do rise, the map is already closer to the ground. You won't always succeed. Some days the old maps run the show. That's all right. Plasticity is patient, and time is a collaborator, if you let it be. The nervous system loves repetition. It loves to practice until a behavior drops beneath language and becomes a posture. Keep offering it events worth remembering. It will memorize them right down to the finger's pressure on the mug and the turning of the head toward the person who is speaking, because you now truly want to hear. At the end of another late night, the refrigerator hum returns as the building grows quiet again. The cup leaves its small moon on the table. The window holds a faint reflection of your face, layered over the street like a double exposure. You watch yourself watching the world. The observer and the observed never fully part, and that turns out to be a mercy. It means you have leverage. You can tilt the attention, and the world inside the glass tilts with it. You can soften the gaze, and hard edges soften in answer. You can choose the next street, and the map will redraw itself, to lead you there not because you commanded the universe, but because you practiced receiving it as it is and participating as you are. This is the quiet revolution. Not a sudden blaze, but a steady reweighing of what deserves your sight. The brain keeps rewriting the map of perception. You decide which neighborhoods get light. And somewhere between the wave of change and the particle of your next small act, you will look up and see that the city you are walking through is not the one you inherited. It is the one you built by how you learned to see. In this late hour, with the neon letter still stuttering, and the bus exhaling at the curb with your reflection layered on the glass, and the street returning its own patient truths, what do you choose to notice first?